Welcome. This podcast series is about consciousness and natural law. In examining consciousness, it is clear that the consciousness of humanity is being held back by various forms of mind control. In this presentation, we're looking at technique 11 of the 14 methods of mind control. This is denial, hassle, and ridicule, which is self-policing and is ignoring reality and policing each other, acting as sheepdogs to the sheep population. Self-policing is because of conditioning and programming. Now, people want to blame government, they want to blame the secret societies, the occult, whoever, for the condition that they're in. But it takes courage to admit that we're the problem, that we're living in a mental, physical, and spiritual prison. It's not at a conscious level, but is of our own design. It is of our own building. We don't need an enslaver beating us down, locking us in cages, trying to kill us. We imprison ourselves, and we do that by giving up our free will. We become prison guards and the prisoners, all by giving up our free will and falling into a lower state of spiritual awareness. Now, these manipulation techniques, the techniques of mind control, work on us regardless of our belief of whether they have an effect or not. And if you want to know who the real sorcerers are of the world, at the top level, at the level of the whole top level of the whole pyramid of manipulation, then you only need to look in the mirror. Most people spend their entire lives running away from themselves, refusing to acknowledge that they are the problem. Now, that does not mean that by changing yourself you will be free. The problem is also that other people are giving up their free will and acting as manipulators. But the object is to change. Once you are mentally on the other side of the fence, then the goal is to help others to climb over that fence and out of their mental prison. So let's look at some of the negative aspects of what people do to themselves to keep themselves in a prison of the mind. So there are three main self-policing techniques. They are denial, hassle, and ridicule. Denial is one of the greatest forms of fear. It usually requires that a person in fear denies the fear itself. Denial is a psychological illness, and it remains one of the most vital factors in suppressing the truth. When people are under tremendous stress and suffering, then acknowledging their condition becomes too mentally, emotionally, and psychologically painful. Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a mental discomfort that arises when a person holds two or more contradictory beliefs in their mind simultaneously. These are values or attitudes. This can lead to a state of tension and anxiety as the person tries to reconcile these conflicting thoughts. Denial is cognitive dissonance, which means that the person lies to themselves about their condition. And cognitive dissonance is a defense mechanism. It's when we refuse to acknowledge the problems and the causal factors. Addiction is an example of denial, as people with an addiction do not want to admit that they have a problem and that their addiction is self-created and self-destructive. People go into denial because of fear. They've chosen fear as the primary mode of consciousness. It is easier to deny and ignore reality rather than feel and confront reality. Now, who says that they want to have their bodies riddled with problems due to addiction? Who says that they want to be enslaved? It's easier to deny problems and addictions than confront them. Now, suppose we're taking steps that cause the illness, the disease, the enslavement. In that case, the only thing that we can do to reverse those conditions is to assume personal responsibility, acknowledge the problems and the causal factors, and then take the responsibility to reverse them, to act. And this means not adding to the same polarity of fear that created those problems. No problem can ever be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it. Albert Einstein. Love is the opposite level of consciousness from fear. While fear creates the problem, fear can never undo it, which means that you can never undo any problem that exists through denial. Denial is based on ignorance, which is based on fear. The outward willing refusal of the truth becomes self-destructive. The solution is an expansive consciousness, which is love. Love brings the desire to seek truth and dissipate denial. In a state of love, we will be willing to look at the truth and seek after knowledge. A problem can be diagnosed through knowledge. And if that's based on love and truth first, then we must conquer fear. We must consciously turn our attention towards the root cause of that problem. Once the causal factors have been identified, then it is possible to act appropriately and with the information needed to take action, to take proper action in the world. The New Age movement is the creation of the dark occult. It was put there to stop people from becoming active, taking proper action in the world. Most New Agers will think that they can meditate their way to peace on earth. Now, freedom is not going to be achieved through meditation. First of all, we need knowledge. Knowledge must be obtained, and that knowledge must be converted into wisdom, which is then taking proper moral action. And this takes courage. It takes courage to act and to conquer fear. Thomas Jefferson said, "If a nation expects to remain ignorant and in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be." Freedom and ignorance are polar opposites. George Orwell called the state of holding opposite ideas in the mind as doublethink, when you could believe that black is black and black is also white. An example of doublethink was the terror attack on the World Trade Center. People believed that the 9/11 attacks were done by 19 Muslim hijackers. Now you can easily see that the buildings were falling in free fall speed, which is 9.81 meters per second. That's only possible if explosive charges were placed at every level of the building and the building came down in a controlled demolition. Now, do you think these Muslim hijackers placed demolition charges beforehand that caused the buildings to come down at the speed of gravity? So the story of 9/11 is doublethink. It is cognitive dissonance. People's senses are telling them one thing, but their mind is telling them something else. Mind is telling people that Government would never hurt people. Because the truth is unacceptable, the only alternative is to accept the official government fairy tale. People are willing to accept a lie like trained sheep because the alternative is just too horrible to contemplate. This is willful denial of truth. And it's a right-brained imbalance because of fear. Religion, politics, the New Age movement, science, or any other form of mind control are boxes for consciousness, where everything in that box is seen as valid. Everything outside of it is off limits for consideration. But the truth is too big to be confined. Truth might be in the box, but it might also be outside of it. Truth can never be squeezed into neat, tiny little packages. The hassle factor is the fear of taking action that should be taken once a certain level of awareness is reached. Many people who know the truth are trapped in this fear, which is the hardest to overcome. The hassle factor is when you know something is wrong and you want to start doing something about it, but you won't. The dominators, the people who bring evil into existence, knowingly bring a more chaotic world into existence, an oppositional consciousness and keep people under mind control. And they're doing this to stop people from taking action for doing what is right. Some people in a state of fear will enact violence against others who are doing what is right. The people who have knowledge of wrongdoing are backing off from doing what is right because they do not want to deal with the consequences, the hassle. They don't want to deal with the police. It's too much hassle. But a lack of action is an abdication of responsibility. When you have chosen fear and chosen non-action, when there is a responsibility to act, this has karmic consequences for the soul. Staying in the hassle-free zone is a grander abdication of responsibility than remaining in denial. People say they don't want to remain in denial would say, well, I never really looked into that for myself, so I don't need to take any action. This denial is also based on denial of personal responsibility. The hassle zone is the fear of knowing, of speaking, and acting because it is just too much trouble to do so. Of all the horrible modes of consciousness to be trapped in, the hassle-free zone is the worst because people who avoid hassle know deeply what's going on. They know what needs to be done. They know the right action to take. And they're willing to refuse to act. And this is an advocation of personal responsibility. It is a pure shunning of wisdom. Wisdom is taking right action with knowledge of what is right and just. And this is the goddess principle, the principle of the sacred feminine. Not acting on what you know is cremating the sacred feminine component of yourself. You're killing part of yourself, your conscience, by putting down the male action element of action. This is because conscience is the knowledge of what is right, which compels you to act morally. This is part of what is ritually enacted in the cremation of care ceremony. Now, the world elite meet once a year at Bohemian Grove, north of San Francisco. An immolation ritual is enacted involving the burning of a child, and it is killing care, killing the sacred feminine aspect of consciousness. When a person has killed this within themselves, within their being, then they will be unable to act in a moral way. They will enact immoral behavior without any conscience. Ridicule is the fear of other people's opinions. The ridicule factor is fear of speaking out your truth, not acting, not speaking out for what is proper, for fear of what other people may think. And we need to get outside this barrier to the truth, not be afraid of other people's opinions. Fear of opinion is like a wall we build ourselves. No one else is building those walls of consciousness. If people were aware of the fear of what others think and started investigating, they could be inspired to search for truth on their own terms. If more people spoke out, then their truth would be spoken into existence. But unfortunately, fear of what others think stops us from speaking out, speaking our truth. Therefore, we also must have the courage to conquer that fear. The biggest obstacle holding people in lower consciousness is worrying about what other people may think. David Icke. Dark occultists successfully use tactics to manipulate and to control the world because they never stop speaking their view of reality into the world. They have a device that does that 24 hours a day, and it's in most houses. It's called a television. Vision. They're constantly telling you their version of reality, putting that vision into your mind and getting you to live in their fantasy world, in their dream. The occultists are constantly using their voices, and they are not divided. They are successful because they are united in their vision. We are not successful because we are not united. The dark occultists act as one overarching mastermind. Their desires manifest because they think, they feel, and they act in unison. Whereas we are an oppositional consciousness. We're not thinking, not feeling, and we are not acting in unison. Therefore, we are not receiving the manifestations of our desires. We need to change people's minds and hearts through courage, inspiration, and knowledge, such that we start to speak our truth, our reality into existence. So the time to speak our reality into existence is now. The present moment is all that exists. It is never too late to begin to take proper action. And excuses are for the lazy, for people who deserve the prison that they will get for their non-action. This presentation was written, read, and produced by Aaron Scudder. Please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you found this information useful, or if you think this presentation could be improved in any way.